Your end of day and end of market recap for Friday, November 10th. Happy Veterans Day, by the way, to all the veterans. I appreciate everything that you've done for our country. So I wanted to say that. A couple quick things. Well, first of all, thank you for joining me. If you are joining me on the live feed, it's always nice to kind of review at the end of the week. Just overall, like a little bit bigger higher level thoughts that I usually provide at towards the end of the week. So we will go through that. And two other things. A couple people have told me that the video isn't in high def when I do this live stream. If it's not fixed today, it'll be fixed on Monday. So I thank you for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate that. The other thing is that I kind of like to mention at the end of the week is that if you do want to see what we do on a day-to-day basis in terms of seeing like our midday note that I put out Monday through Thursday. Fridays we do member Q&A, and also our end of day recap, so you can see like what my positions are. On the midday note, you can see the charts, the chart setups that get me into the positions, and a little bit about that, as well as just like the overall themes for the day. Our midday note, I try to basically make it so that it's readable in about like a minute, and you can get as much information and content about what's going on in the day, what the major themes are, where the performance is coming from, the relative strength, the trends, and some individual movers and so on and so forth, as well as important levels to watch in the indices too. So all of that I try to get for you to be able to like read and scroll in a minute. So if you want a free look at that, you can get a 5-day free trial. Go to tribecatradegroup.com and you can put in your address, and you'll get that for 5 days. And then at the end of the 5 days, we won't bother you or anything like that. At the end of once your time is done. But it's a great free look to see, how we're kind of positioning ourselves too. So that said, let me get to today's themes, and there was a few different things that occurred from yesterday, and then I will get to the overall weekly review. So, I mean, for themes for the day, and first of all, if I didn't mention this, risk disclaimer, please read the full risk disclaimer. Everything that we're going through in these videos and live streams are for information purposes only. But I mean, this was a huge move today in the Qs, and I've been being a little bit sarcastic because I like to be, and I like to joke around a little bit. I've been mentioning like on Twitter, like, because everybody's so fixated on the magnificent seven names, right? It doesn't matter what financial media you turn on, it seems like they're fixated on those seven names, and I get it. They are the seven biggest names in the major indices, so they do deserve some attention. But what I disagree with is that they also seem to kind of make this they insinuate that those are the only names that are going up. That's not true. There's a lot of other names, but they're not going to get that much attention because some of the names just aren't as big of weight that you will find in the indices. So it kind of gets a little bit drawn out. But it's not like those are the only seven names that are participating. That's not true. And I think if you do your homework, you will find out that that there are many other names, especially when we've got what we've got, essentially what is going on right now in the market, where you've got a lot of different areas. I shouldn't say a lot of different areas, but you have a few different areas that are breaking out. And you could see, if you look at the SPX, and I will blow this up for you so that you could see it a little bit more. And I hope that's good enough. But you have 74 names that made in the S&P that made 4-week highs right now. So you've got a lot of movers. And if you look at, and again, it's a nice distribution. There's more names going up. 74 names made 4-week highs or 1-month highs versus only 22 names that made new 4-week lows. So that's a pretty good distribution. And if you want to know 52-week, and again, this is just for the S&P, right? But this is also pretty clear too, right? 52-week new highs, right? There's 25 names here that made new 52-week highs. And notice, like, as much as those magnificent seven names get the attention, I think that there there's not that many of them. I think Microsoft made a new high today, a new 52-week high, but I think that's it. The rest of them are pretty close. So yeah, here's Microsoft. But you don't have the rest of the Magnificent Seven breaking out to new 52-week highs. Now, like I said, they're close. They're not far. They're not far, but they're not made. I just find it more interesting that there is a Broadcom made a new high today. Adobe made a high. You got Costco in there, Clack. Right, we're going to talk about the semis in a minute too. Cadence, Cadence and Synopsys just continue to crush it in terms of semis. No one talks about those names. I know there's got to be a few people out there, but in terms of the overall traffic, Synopsys and Cadence, have you seen these charts? SNPS and CDNS, really, really strong semiconductors, and they've been that way, right? For the even during October, those names were strong too. So in any event, that's what I think that's important. Yes, and the Qs are showing that relative performance. And I will begin to kind of go through a couple of charts. Also, just a side note here, bonds. I don't want to spend too much time on bonds today because I've spent a lot of time on them. But bottom line, right? A few people pointed this out to me because I mentioned this yesterday too, that how similar yesterday's candle was back on 10/12 when we had the last 30-day bond auction. So today kind of resembled a little bit about like very close to what you saw on 10/13. So overall, I don't think this is going to repeat exactly the same way, because I do think that things change. But I would want to see TLT stay above 86.34, and if that happens, if price can stay above that top of the November value area for the rest of the month, then I think equities can kind of do their own thing. Right, because there has been a lot of focus on bonds. So, again, it doesn't mean that equities are just going to fly up. It just means it's one less thing that was basically weighing down on equity. So I think TLT continues to be a must watch, and that's why I bring it up. Right. A couple things to mention here. This is just S&P futures, but we were kind of, until today, the S&P was essentially flat for the week. Right. So we had this big performance obviously last week, but the S&P was flat coming into today. So we did have some digestion, and we were hesitating a little bit just under the top of value for the month. We did break that, and that was, notice the significance here because we just marched higher once we broke that 44.01 level. You can also see this a little bit easier here when we look at the 1-hour chart, right? Because here's where we started the week. Right, like right on this, or here's where we finished, I guess, on Friday, right? And we spent a little bit of time digesting a couple days this week, really for the S&P sideways. And then, of course, we try to go higher, break above this version point of control. Price didn't like it, kind of came back in. And buyers, and by the way, like this is something to kind of observe here, is that when we do get some dips here, whether or not buyers are going to come charging back in, and that's essentially what we saw, today, is that buyers took advantage of a little bit of a dip or a little bit of reversal, right? And that's symbolic to me for now of strong markets. When you do get a dip, buyers are showing up. Let's talk about the Qs because those are definitely showing that outperformance. I spent some time in yesterday's videos saying that we got hit with a little bit overhead supply and a little bit of rejection. The chart that I sent out this morning on Substack, you can find that. And I said, well, because I don't know what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis. No one does, right? But I said, if we can hold this 369.89, then the easy to try to like give levels and say, hey, if this happens, right, then you can make this decision. And that's the way I try to frame things. And what I said this morning was, if price stays above 369.89, then I would want to be long the Qs, right, versus that level. Right. That's an easy way that you can kind of take some of these levels that I present in some of these charts, which I believe are significant because I am using volume at price. Right. And you'll see it, over and over that things will stop at particular prices. Right. But it's just basically, and to take a step back, that's really how technical analysis really helps. It just helps frame decisions. Like, for example, price stays above this level. I want to be long. Price breaks the support. I want to be neutral, right? I want to get out of the position, right? That's how technical analysis is mostly used. It's not a predictive thing. Sometimes people get lost with that. They think that there is some type of predictive factor that happens in technical analysis. It's not. It's just basically, especially if you're a trend follower or if you're playing momentum, it gives you an area to go long to know where you're going to be right or wrong, right? It's always about having ideas, but we all know that we're not going to be right all the time. So you can have your ideas and the price action will tell you will substantiate whether you're correct or whether you're incorrect, right? And whether to reassess. So we tagged this perfectly yesterday, right? We hit some overhead supply and the sellers won yesterday, right? Of course, there was, a bond auction that really moved things or kicked things around a little bit. But buyers came back in here, right? And if you notice, so again, I look at multiple time frames. Here's what the Qs did on the open today, and it's the same thing with the S&P, right? We started here, we kind of like back tested a little bit. We didn't even get down to the bottom of value on the Qs, but we found some buyers kind of came in here a little bit after those Michigan sentiment numbers. Bad news again is good news for stocks right now. Here was the S&P, right? Found support, right? And the last one that I'll go over here, but I'll do this in 10 seconds is IWM. Basically, I'm not really participating too much in IWM. I just don't want to really see it break down. If I see prices in IWM really break down, then I think that we've got a bigger overall problem. So for now, a little bit of what I refer to as a kick save. We held in here the bottom of value, and for now we're staying inside the value area for the month. It's fine. Next, I want to talk about sectors, right? So I think you've got 3 different groups that are showing some really nice strength, possibly 4, right? And then there's always going to be a couple other ones to keep an eye on. So so first of all, let's start with the one that had this big day today. And, if you were paying attention to the market yesterday, despite that kind of reversal that we saw yesterday, the semis were really showing some nice strength yesterday, right? You had a lot of names that started to push higher. Broadcom was one of those names that I got into Broadcom 2 days ago, which helped. That was a nice gainer for me. It was one name. I trimmed a couple positions yesterday. I took off a couple trims, took off a couple swing trades yesterday, but I also kept a chunk of trades on, right? I wanted the right exposure. Broadcom was one of those names that I kept on yesterday because I just thought that something was potentially brewing in the semiconductors. So here's one of the stronger sectors. Also note, I began to kind of really pay attention to the semis once we got to the top of the value area. We tagged that earlier in the week, and we basically had one doji in here. Again, reversal day yesterday, but we didn't break back into the value area, so kind of a bit of a retest. And then today had a huge day, and there was some comments from Taiwan Semiconductor that kind of lit the group on fire today. But you go through this group, right? CLAC had a huge, CLAC is a name that I know a couple of traders have been trading in the Tribeca Trade Group room. This was a nice move. I mentioned Broadcom, right? We've talked about that one. That was one of our watch list names to start the week. I mentioned that I really like these patterns where, again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but just as long as you're in an uptrend and you consolidate for a while, right? That's normal price. That's normal when price will basically slow down a little bit and digest right before the next advance up. Right now, look at this breakout. I mean, this is really like the first week of this breakout. I think that this is potential to continue to break out. Where it goes to, I don't have a target for you, but that's where trailing stops come in, right? Some traders get a little bit afraid of that. They're like, oh, I got to have a target. I got to have a place where I know to take the trade off. If you're a little bit more experienced trading, you know that a trailing stop is the best thing that you can do, right? You want things to trend for as long as they want to trend, right? And I know there's uncertainty there. That's why you continue to ratchet up a trailing stop, right? So that way, of course, you're not going to catch the very top. But again, if you've been around trading a little bit, you know that what you try to really do is not time tops, right? You try to capture the majority of the move, right? And then don't worry about the last day. The last day you're going to give back a little bit of profits. But I think this has a chance to really move higher. Of course, Nvidia, which was a name that I was in yesterday, I ended up taking it off at the end of the day yesterday. It's fine. I bought it back today and making a nice move. This one I do have a price target for because there's some overhead supply right around 491. All right, moving on. AMD has not been a name that I've really gotten involved in. Doesn't matter. You can't be in every single name, and there's plenty of other stocks in a particular group that's showing relative strength. I like names that don't have to go through all of this overhead supply. Hence, you're going to have to get through 120.75, which is some overhead supply. There's a couple other names. So I mentioned Synopsys, right, which I'm long in my TTG trend portfolio. Cadence, right? So again, you're noticing that it's not just one name in the group, right? I can go through 2 or 3 other names too, that you're seeing a lot of a lot of what's not concentration, but good participation is what I'm looking for. So semis, that's the first group, right? But the next group, which was actually the first group to begin to get over its October highs, was XLK Tech, and this has been very, very strong. Microsoft is leading the charge. I talked about how I was in this trade and I got out of it because I thought it was a little bit extended. I actually was talking about in our pre-market session this morning. I said, "Oh, if it comes in a little bit more, I'm going to be a buyer." I'm like, maybe, and I started to think like right around 397, right, being a little bit cute, thinking like this would need to get filled. Nope. Right. Again, it's just very symbolic of a very strong name. They don't have very big pullbacks, right? They have small pullbacks and then that's it. And then they rip to new highs. So very, very strong. I am long this in the TTG trend portfolio because it's tough to market time and get everything right. Sometimes it's better when you've got strong names just to hold them and not, micromanage, in terms of getting out and getting back in. Right. That's always the tough thing. If you get out of a name and take profits, right, the name may not be done. Right. But at least, I've got exposure in other places. So I think, that's the best of the group. The name that's been surprising me is Apple. That continues to move higher and above its value area because those 2 names are about 45% of the XLK ETF. So that's your second group. Your third group is IGV software. This did hit a version point of control, but a really nice move. Notice that's also above the October highs. So that's your 3 groups that are really showing strength. The fourth one that is on deck, I would say, is XLC, which is the communications ETF. Remember, this ETF contains both a heavy chunk of Meta, Facebook, as well as Google. Those 2 names make up about 45% of the ETF. I favor Meta here. Meta looks very close to breaking out. Remember when I was in this trade a couple of weeks back in October, it took out this version point of control, and that was it for now, right? So high concentration of buyers and sellers from the year 2022, right? And they kind of, that overhead supply came into the picture, and there was more sellers than buyers on this first attempt. Second attempt may get this name to push through. Right. So that's a name that I would definitely be watching next week. So that's your fourth group, and everything else is just not there yet. That's okay. Sometimes you're not going to see everything break out. We could go through other sectors, but I don't want to waste your time. Industrials are going to be interesting to watch. They did break out of their value area, did not get above the 200-day moving average. But we did this exercise earlier for members, so I don't want to go too deep into this. SLX doesn't look bad. So there's a couple of them that don't look bad, right? And then there's a few that don't look so hot too. So, XLV, this is one that I always keep an eye on. It's trending down, right? I don't want to be in something that's below its value area. So again, you can wait until this builds and corrects, but it's not there yet, right? The other big group is consumer discretionary. Just like a couple of the other sectors, it's dominated by 2 names, Amazon, Tesla. Tesla's been a little bit of an underperformer, and that's why this is, still inside the value area versus breaking higher. Still important to take note of, because you could go through these individual names, and if one or two names is weighing it down, no offense to Tesla, I'm not trying to say anything negative, but it's sitting there below value, and it's been showing relative weakness since it reported earnings. That is often the key, right? Is that if a company does not have a great earnings report, it can often be a little bit of what we refer to as dead money for the next quarter, right? That's often what happens. Couple other things that I would mention. Just go back to my spreadsheet. We talk next week, right? We are going to have an interesting week. We have both the CPI and the PPI reports, right? We keep hearing about all these Fed speakers. I'm like, listen, I won't waste your time talking about the Fed speakers and how they're not saying anything new, right? In my opinion, they're not hawkish. They're not dovish, right? Because that's what you see. That's what you hear, right? Oh, they were hawkish today. Oh, they were a little more hawkish than usual. They're not. All they're telling you is what their job is to try to get inflation down, right? They'll get more dovish once they see inflation down, right? This is a little bit of, I hate to say it, but it's common sense. They're not going to say anything different unless they start to see inflation come down, right? This is when you look at this white line, right? This is the year-over-year inflation, right? Notice how this thing was coming down and it's starting to come up again. So yes, they're kind of worried about that. They're not hawkish. They're worried that inflation is that they're not gonna get this down to where they want it to go, which they've been saying over and over and over again. What's their goal? You should know this by now if you're paying attention. Their goal is 2%. So yeah, they're going to get a little bit, if you want to use the term hawkish, when you see inflation come back up to 4% year over year, they're not going to like it. And they're going to talk more about the possibility of raising interest rates because their job isn't done, right? So you don't have to hang on every one of their words of word scramble, because that's basically what they're doing. Is they're just coming out and saying they've got it, they want to get inflation down. And I kind of agree with that, right? Who wants high inflation, right? And by the way, this is the rate of change, right? This is not the overall level of inflation over the last couple of years. This is the rate of change. So more and more, we don't want to see another 4% inflation on top of what we've already experienced over the last couple of years, right? We want to see the prices at least stop going higher, right? And at least if we get back to 2 or 3%, it's not that noticeable. But again, look back at where we were 2019, right? This is what we want to see, and their job's not done yet. So hopefully it'll just take more time, but we'll see. Here's the report for next week, right? The CPI is on Tuesday and the PPI is on Wednesday. They're looking for only a 0.1, ex-food and energy 0.3. Right. And here's the PPI. So again, I don't know what the numbers are going to be, so I'm just going to move on. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention because everybody will be focused on that, and so on and so forth. Also, last thing I'll go over here, maybe I'll talk about a few single names to watch for next week. But here's your performance for the week. SPY was up 1.4%. Again, all that performance coming from today. The Qs were up 2.9%. You had a little underperformance there with international. TLT was up for the week. So even though volatility yesterday, still up for the week, which is good. Semis led the charge by basically some of the areas that we already talked about, but there's your raw numbers. Semis were up 5.2%. Tech not too far behind 4.5%. And then there wasn't much behind that. Right. So these are your areas. And, for now, it's going to be riding the trend in some of these names. I put together an earnings watch list, and that also comes out on the end of the day recap. So make sure that you sign up. But right now I've got 70 names that have had strong earnings, either strong earnings reaction or gap up. So that's going to keep us busy for the next quarter, right? There's so many names that are acting, pretty darn well, in terms of that. Palantir was so this is what I tend to focus on, right? Palantir, right? Earnings gap settles in. Look at the low volume as we kind of come in here, right? And then it's just a matter of time and setting an alert. That's all you have to do. You don't have to predict. My alert was right here, this previous high. Where did I get into Palantir today? And again, was not a big trade, right at 1049, 11, 19. Yeah, so right here, waited for it just to clear this, a little bit of confirmation, because I don't want to sit in this back and forth. I want this, right? So yeah, I do wait for once I have a signal, and then I look to go long, right? And Palantir, where could this go to? Just like Meta, right? It has this virgin point of control on the weekly. I think that'll be the next area to test right around 2020. A few other names. This Hilton was really nice. This was our out of the box name for today that I put out, every morning. Again, probably not a focus name for many, but just came up on a scan. A nice breakout, right? So I thought that was really good. Another name that I'm watching for next week is Adobe. Right, Adobe had a nice little kind of check back here to the 5-period moving average, right? And I think Adobe could rally up to 624 out of this, consolidation. Another name that I think a lot of people are watching. I'm watching it too. I traded it earlier in the week. DraftKings, right? DraftKings hit this virgin point of control, tagged it perfectly, right? Perfect move out of this virgin point of control. Where else would you know? I'm sorry to kind of pat myself on the back here with the indicator that we've come up with, but where else would you know that there's resistance right there, right? A trend line? I don't think so. But volume at price telling us there was resistance. I sold exactly when this, exactly on that virgin point of control, but I like the tight price action. I think this does resolve higher, and I'll try to get, I'm not in it right now, and I will look to get in it next week. That's it for today's recap, for the week's recap. Really nice price action. I think, one of the lessons, and I review this with members too, where I have a little bit of difficulty. We all have difficulties, by the way. There's no one out there in terms of trading who knows every single move, right? One of the things that I tend to look for, or one of the things that I try to improve on, is just not getting over the, use a skiing expression, not getting over the tips of my skis with risk, right? I mentioned, like yesterday, I probably had on like one or two many trades yesterday with that third bond auction, and that's fine. Sometimes you have to pare that back, right? We want to be selling, of course, into strength, but sometimes you get caught a little bit. But it's fine. I pared back my risk. I kept on the trades that I wanted to, and had a wonderful day today. So I hope you did as well. I also hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you guys Monday. Have a great weekend, everybody.